you dumped her? And he goes, no, she dumped me. I'm like, oh, when? And you could see him get teary-eyed. He said, right before I came on the mountain gives me the money so I can put them in school. I never got to get an education. At an emotional level, all human beings are the same. We all feel the same emotions for different reasons, and they vary in depth, but we all feel the same emotion. So I no longer have to suffer from terminal uniqueness. I went on a mission to prove or disprove this. So I travel all over the world, and I've been very fortunate. And I was like, is this true? And so I talked to everybody and basically asked them a lot of the same questions, just to get to know them. But it's like, hey, how's it going? You got a girlfriend? You got a wife? You got a whatever? And so I talked to the poorest people I could find on the planet and the richest person that I know on the planet. And the poorest were on Mount Kilimanjaro when I went and hiked to the top of the mountain. And so our guides are there. And I remember talking to two guides specifically quite a bit. They were young. And I said to the one guy, hey, you got a girlfriend? And he's like, oh, boss, I did have a girlfriend. I'm like, what do you did? And he goes, yeah, we broke up. And I'm like, you dumped her? And he goes, no, she dumped me. I'm like, oh, when? And you could see him get teary-eyed. He said, right before I came on the mountain. And I'm like, oh, dude, we talked through it. And then I say to this other guy, I'm like, how about you? You married? You got a girlfriend? He said, I'm married. And I said, oh, you got kids? Yeah, two girls, young. And I'm like, oh, man, and you spend all this time on the mountain? And he goes, yeah, and he lights up. He says, I don't like being away from my kids, but he goes, the mountain gives me the money so I can put them in school. I never got to get an education. And then I said, does your wife have a to-do list for you when you get home and you got a bunch of shit to do? He's like, yeah. I'm like, what the hell? Like, you work your ass off, right? And we laugh. And I said, how are your parents? And he goes, oh, I worry about my dad. And he said, I miss my wife and my family, but I do this for them. And I've asked doctors, farmers, school teachers, every person that tradespeople, like every kind of, career that I could, and people at different places in their life, those same questions. And then I asked a guy that I know is a billionaire, and I was having dinner with him one night, and I asked him, I said, you work all over, you're gone a lot. Like, do you miss your wife and your kids? And it's like, yeah. I said, do you worry about your kids? He's like, yeah, God, I worry about them a lot. They have this life of privilege, and I worry how that's gonna shape them. And I said, when you come home from work, like, does your wife make you do shit? Does she have a to-do list? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, what the hell? And then I said to him, how are your parents? And I know his family. And he says, well, Dad's not doing very well, and I'm pretty worried about him. And then I said to him, have you ever been dumped? He's like, well, I was married before. I'm like, well, I always assumed you broke up with her because you're like Batman to me, dude. Like, and he said, no. He said, she broke up with me, and we're eating steak. And I say to him, how did that feel? And he looks up at me and he says, how do you think it felt? My heart was broken. I'm like, thank you. Thank you. Like, that's awesome. Not that you got your heart broke, but you validated to me because you answered the questions the exact same way as the person that I talked to on the mountain that had nothing. Gets paid $12 a day to pack my shit up to the top of the mountain. And here's a guy who is a multi-billionaire. And they answered those questions. Emotionally, they responded the same when I asked about their kids, their wives, their parents, and love and heartache. Exactly the same. And for me, there was no doubt after that at an emotional level, all human beings are the same. We all feel the same emotions for different reasons, and they vary in depth, but we all feel the same emotion. So I no longer have to suffer from terminal uniqueness.